As CEO of the Institute for Global Futures, James Canton has advised White House administrations, the National Science Foundation, and global fortune companies on trends in innovation, finance, healthcare, life sciences, energy, they can see him there, waiting to come on, security, workforce, climate change, and globalization, so pretty much everything. And this morning, he's going to give us an overview of the most recent forecasts that will help shape the future marketplace, society, and he says, your life. CNN calls him the digital guru, Yahoo calls him Dr. Future, we can call him James Canton. So please give a very warm welcome to James.
Well, good morning. How is everyone? We can do better than that. How is everyone? Ready to go? Ready. Particularly our colleagues in the front. How are you? Great job for all of that. I don't do that thing, but I will do something for you because I have to catch up with my friend here. You ready? Something a little unusual, something unplanned, something physical just to wake everybody up, right? Paul, you ready? Alex, what do you think? Should I do it? Yeah. Vote, yes or no? Okay, you ready? Okay, now let's get serious, right? So I'm going to give you an overview of what's next, what's coming in the near future. And some of it will seem a little strange. I head up a think tank. I do one thing and think about what's coming next in the future. I call it strategic foresight, but really it's a combination of tools and insights where I get to talk to your most important strategic asset. And who might that be? Your customer, your customer's customers. I try to understand what they're thinking about next, and I do that for some of the largest brands and companies and governments in the world. And sometimes I'm actually right, but not all the time. I'm going to talk about kinetic changes, changes that are completely dynamic. My goal is to disrupt your thinking. I am not just going to talk about things that perhaps you're here to focus on, such as mobile or just the internet. I'll say some things about that, but I'll leave that to some of the other folks that are really specialists. I want to talk about some larger, grander visionary trends that within them are fantastic opportunities. So my task, my challenge is to incite you to think about some of these other trends and what you might be able to do to maybe turn it into a business or an opportunity for you. I'll also talk about how everything is accelerating. Time in itself is collapsing. Have you noticed things as you get older, regardless of whether you're 25 or you're 55 or 60, time seems to be accelerating. So I'll talk about that, right? Don't look so astounded. I'll also talk about that every risk is an opportunity. Well, let's get going. Welcome to the extreme future. What do I mean by this? I wrote a book about this, and it really was an attempt to be able to say accelerated changes, massive disruptions are the new normal. That's what we have to learn to manage and deal with. So our ability to be able to change quick enough, which I call future readiness, to get future ready, to help our clients get ready, to help their customers get ready, to help our colleagues, our organizations to get ready. We need to be able to move a lot faster to take advantage of these trends. And I'll break down what these key trends are. But the key idea is velocity. Velocity is actually an economic term, has to do with the amount of money that's in a system that creates new ventures, it creates buying and selling, it accelerates the way that people do commerce. But it's bigger than just that. It also has to do with ideas. The velocity of ideas, new ideas, many disruptive ideas about not just technology, but climate change, energy, certainly meeting the grand challenges of dealing with the planet, such as food or hunger or healthcare, the future of medicine. This is what we need to approach. And I'll try to map out a logic pattern about where we are and where we're going. I'll also suggest to you that you really want to ask this question and take this back to your companies, your organizations, whether big or small. Are we future ready? How do we define future readiness in our organization? How do our customers define future readiness? What is it going to take for us as an organization to get future ready? What kind of people are we going to need? What kind of resources? What kind of technologies? what kind of different strategies, maybe completely different ways of thinking. How you define future readiness, my first big takeaway for you, how you define future readiness may determine how sustainable your organization is, your business is for the future. It will determine the sustainability of nations. It will determine the sustainability of we as a planet meet certain challenges. So I would take that question back with you, because everybody's answer is going to be a little different. But that's how to build your next strategic plan. Show of hands, how many folks have a strategic plan for the next 3 to 5 years for their organization? Show of hands. This is our survey. About 5 people in the room. Patrick, you can't raise your hand. It's unfair. Yeah, so when futurists raise their hands, I mean, what's up with that? You'll hear from Patrick later on. So about 5 or 6 of you, maybe a little bit more, so I've got a really hard job. I got to get moving here, don't you think? Okay, so let me go further. To me, the key driver of all change is the innovation economy, but it's not because of cool technologies themselves, it's the challenges that face our world in being able to manage the grand challenges. How are we going to be able to feed, clothe, provide health care for the next couple of billion people, right? So we're at 7 billion people now. We're talking about going to 8.5, maybe 9 billion, certainly by 2050. The carrying capacity of the planet is at risk. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Clearly, the tension between the rise of intelligent machines, which are needed to be able to even take care of the aging boomers, right? Those of us who want to age with some kind of style and care, and humans, and the tension between jobs and technology, when doing work is becoming more and more complex, this is going to be an overarching theme in our society only for about the next 200 years. After that, do not email me. I don't want to get emails after that. It's only good for that period of time. Does somebody need to translate that joke? What do you think? Okay, so let me move forward and bring it forth. A couple of the key trends that are going to shape the marketplace and shape your business strategy. One I call is blended reality. It's the mashup, combination of physical reality, objects, vehicles, humans, our physical world, with augmented information that is sputtered into that same space. Google Glasses is the beginning of wearables. So what's on your desktop, you'll wear tomorrow. Eventually, wearables will start to pick up. Now, there are many augmented reality and blended reality informationscapes that are already available on your phone. But it's cumbersome. You have to take it out and look at things, and you can see layered information. What if you didn't need to do that? What if it was sputtered for you right on your retina? And that's where it will be. Eventually, we'll take those glasses off to get away from it, but most media convergence, where the computer, the TV, your mobile devices, certainly video game devices, you think about a world where that, because of Moore's law, is shrunk down to a wearable, and that wearable likely could be on your wrist, but it will give you choices of different levels of seeing and perception that will put you in what I call a blended reality. You're starting to see this happen in some of the new cars that are coming out, the new autos. BMW, some of the high-end cars are now sputtering information on the screens where you could be able to get I've seen some prototypes that are coming out this year, where you'll be able to get with Android and iOS devices, your emails can be sputtered on the windshield while you're driving, so you'll be able to have voice I/O to be able to interact. What's the future of your windshield as a new platform for advertising? We'll talk a little bit more about that. Anybody interested in buying any real estate in space? Condos in space? Sound crazy? I don't think so. The private space industry, it may be the largest multi-billion-dollar opportunity that very few folks are involved in. Within 3 to 5 years, the private space industry will take off. You're talking about a massive new way to be able to create drugs, for instance. You can only make certain pharmaceuticals in zero gravity. You think about the world demand. Let's be futurists for a moment and converge demographics with innovation and needs. Certainly healthcare for the next 2 to 3 billion people, we have to have an entirely new pharmaceutical infrastructure to make drugs that will not just heal people, but also enhance their well-being and prevent illness. Many of those will be made in an accelerated format in space. That space meaning it can be, orbiting the US or Europe or the rest of the world. The point is that space laboratories to produce pharmaceuticals, to produce super materials for manufacturing, being able to even do CAD/CAM and 3D manufacturing, this is going to be an entirely new arena of production, yet very few people know about it or are planning for it. There's about 20 companies on the planet today that are involved in the private space industry. You want to pay attention, look around. Why? Everything that you're doing right now, I would challenge you to say that there's at least one or two competencies your organization has that might be relevant for an entirely new industry that it's in its infancy. Imagine talking to you when I was at Apple Computer in 1979, 1980. We were talking about the personal computer industry then. Everybody thought we were crazy, everybody. The idea that you'd have a personal computer on your desk. The idea that doctors and hospitals would have computers, or you'd use them in manufacturing for being able to not just do spreadsheets, but understanding how to share information and be able to share knowledge to be able to better improve manufacturing. It was crazy. This is like 1979, 1980. It's the beginning of a massive series of revolutions, and one of them certainly has to do with private space. I'll talk a little bit more about this. The notion of pervasive computing, where every habitat, every building, every house has its own embedded intelligence, and therefore is trading energy with other homes, it is interacting and collaborating with other habitat intelligences, where you're surrounded by information that's customized for you. The big shift that's going to happen with the internet is not about technology, it's about the internet doing the most fundamental intuitive thing that all of us do as humans. And what is that? We pay attention to other humans. We try to figure out, so that when the internet starts paying attention to you, starts reacting to you, starts being predictive of you, as we move towards the Internet of Things and we move towards what's next in terms of sensors, we're going to have a very different world. This is an example of a home where you're able to access information on demand, you're able to go ahead and make transactions, communicate. More importantly, your habitats are vehicles, even the external world, where everything has an IP address, will start paying attention to you. What will that mean? Whether you're in Madrid, San Francisco, New York, it will anticipate our needs and be able to provide those needs. It'll be very spooky. Also, I want to point out another key trend has to do with the emergence of megacities. So there is right now a flight to cities worldwide. Interesting, again, we'll play the futurist game, if you will. The largest percentage of population mobility on the planet is moving to cities, and those cities, approximately 90% of them, are on coastal areas. And those coastal areas, particularly where the largest megacities, that's 10 million and above folks are living, are in the developing world, and those, finally, to complete the algorithm, are the cities that are most at risk for what? Climate change, rising seas. Think about the implications of that. I can tell you my real estate clients are thinking about that, my government clients are thinking about that. Is there an opportunity there for an entirely new kind of smart infrastructure, a better way to manage risk, to be able to create new products and services for that future? I think that's 100 new companies, 1,000 new kinds of jobs, an entirely new infrastructure of mitigating and managing climate change for where most of the population will be living. How about reprogramming matter? Reprogramming matter, the ability to create and coax the self-assemblage of matter, nanoscience, nanoengineering. This is a much bigger, I'll talk a little bit more about some of these trends as we move forward in the presentation, but I can tell you, this is much bigger than the internet. This is much bigger than wireless. This is much bigger than even, well, it relates to healthcare and what's next for drugs and medicine, but the manipulation of matter at the atomic level will give us an insight, a toolkit into the creation of worlds and again, to meet the grand challenges of this planet, whether it's more energy, clean energy, whether it's addressing hunger, whether it's addressing wealth and sustenance for a population around the world. Keep in mind, 1 billion people on the planet have not seen a clean glass of water. Does that represent a business opportunity for you? A lot of people think so. And when I talk about being future ready, how might the future change when organs on demand, when we have the ability to be able to scan our DNA, which we have now, to create a personal genomic idea, so genomic informatics, the information science applied to genomics, where we'll know, Alex will know, by the time before he is 50, we will know with certainty when he may need an organ because of some failure. It could be his kidney, could be his heart. If it's his brain, sorry, Alex, we're not going to help you with that. We're not, that's, 2050, sorry, Alex. Your kids can worry about that stuff. We're not uploading and downloading brains at the moment. But will we be able to fix certain organs? Now, you combine that, he'll go for a checkup, he'll get a bit of DNA testing, which will determine his risk factor analysis. All of this will be on his smartphone, and all of a sudden now, he'll fall into a category where we'll be able to identify early on the precursors of when that organ might fail. If we can't fix that failure, we might start growing him an organ on demand. Now you're talking about a very different world. Between the US, Europe alone, over 150,000 people die because they can't get the organs they need. Worldwide, you're talking about over a couple of million. What will be the implication? Now you may say, gee, we're not sure. Why is that important? Well, again, let's converge some other trends. Europe's key challenge over the next 25 to 30 years is depopulation. You have to increase immigration, but at the same time, you've got to train for an entirely new workforce. The loss of productivity, the lack of replacement of bodies that are producing in the European workforce is the largest critical risk factor facing Europe over the next 25 to 30 years. And interestingly, in some countries where there are more people on the dole that are in the workforce, such as Italy is one example, that's unsustainable when you run out those numbers. So the ability to be able to keep people living longer who are productive, keeping people, retraining them, but also being able to know, right now there are two things we share in this room. One, nobody knows when they're going to die. Second is, nobody's as funny as I am. Okay, that's questionable maybe. The third is that you don't know exactly when you're going to get ill. Now imagine the implications if we could increase that insight and awareness into our genomic future by having a capability to be able to cut that in half. So now we know 50% of you when you may get ill, and then we can start to create an entirely new healthcare system, personalized medicine, but based on prediction, promotion. That's a very different kind of healthcare system than what we have now. We don't have the tools. This is the Middle Ages. It will also lead to new kinds of transportation, cleaner, more environmentally impactful. Part of the bad news in North America is fracking and gas. You notice as more and more, like there's right now in Argentina, Siberia, and the Arctic, certainly it looks like there's a significant amount of petro resources yet to be extracted. And in Argentina right now, it looks like it may be one of the largest. Off of Brazil is another one. There's a direct relationship between, as more and more large dinosaur fields are found for petro resources, a decline in renewable investments. That is not a sustainable 100-year path for being energy independent and resourceful. And in terms of energy independence for transportation, I'll just make a forecast here, which is a near-term forecast. The US, well, let's say North America will likely be as much as 80 to even 95% totally independent of OPEC oil, foreign oil purchases, possibly within as early as 3 to 5 years. That will have a massive shift in power on the planet. That's a geostrategic shift, which will be offset by what? Likely China. likely China's demand. China's rising GDP, that's 7% now, as it peaks up over 7.5% to 8%, their demand, the drag on China's GDP, their growth is going to be energy. And that's where they're going to offset that. But clearly, you're going to see a complete shift in the geostrategic power on the planet as key players such as the US and in some instances Europe start to purchase less oil from OPEC and the waning of that monopoly. Let's talk a little bit more about being future ready. Who are your customers of tomorrow? Have you considered the customers that you don't have today that are emerging and how they might look at your information? How might they think about it? This is a cute kid, isn't it? Yeah. So this kid is doing what? Is he checking out your offerings? Is he doing e-commerce? Is he doing online education? Is he trading online? Is he collaborating on a social media? He's using a natural interface called voice. Is that your customer? How many of you are positioning for that customer today by rethinking what your organization is about? Whether you're in Poland or Europe, wherever you are in the world, how many people are thinking about that as their customer? Show of hands. 3 people. I've got a lot of work to do. Yeah. This is your customer. This customer is coming much faster than you think. The youngest generation, even the pre-millennials, are moving so quickly in terms of their adoption of not technology, but access to markets, access to being able to be entrepreneurs, access to global borderless communications and information. And whether you, regardless of what city you're in or what language you speak, this is an emerging demographic in India and China and around the world that will shape the conversation around what business and what kind of success and sustainability your business has. So we'll say a few things about the web and we'll drip down into demographics and population. By 2030, web capacity, I believe, will equal the human brain. What do I mean by that? Do I think the internet's going to be as smart as humans? No. I do think the capacity to be able to hold exabytes, terabytes of information, and being able to do a better job, a more efficient job at learning from humans what humans need for technology to be able to deliver may outpace what humans can do in terms of speed and capability, not in terms of emotion. I do not believe that emotional intelligence will show up in machines, nor do I believe sentience will show up. But I do believe there'll be a new category, a new evolutionary category of which humans and technology are enhanced and interact. In fact, I think designed evolution will enhance minds. I'll give you one interesting reason for this. So 1 in 3 men in this room is at risk for Alzheimer's. 1, 2, 3, you. 1, 2, 3, you. 1, 2, 3, you. 1, 2, 3. Not you. All right, maybe Paul. We'll see. What are the implications? There's about 100 companies working on defeating and transforming the aging brain. Let me share with you my forecast of what's going to happen in that. So we're going to do what we've been very good at as a planetary society. We figure out how to, what is that particular gene or what is that pharmaceutical we could get to enhance memory. How many people would like to have total recall? Look at a document, learn a language, be able to recall once, watch it, get it, happen, right? You 3 don't want that. Is that true? Okay, you don't. You've had enough, right? We're going to be able to address the needs of Alzheimer's in our generation. But interesting, what's going to come from that is something more profound, I believe. And that is our ability to be able to enhance cognition, enhance intelligence, enhance memory. By fixing many things, we end up doing what? Learning how to enhance those capabilities. Who's not going to want to have access to that information? Nobody. And will we have access? What culture, what nation, what parent would not want to be able to make their population or kids smarter? What is the possibilities we'll be able to increase memory as a capability? Very high. Think about it, right? Think about it today. I know professors that are using certain pharmaceuticals that have been prescribed for ADD, which of course sounds like everybody has some portion thereof. They have to use certain pharmaceuticals to keep up with their graduate students. We know people are taking Prozac to remove the anxiety so they can be more productive. Certainly Cialis has become a leisure pharmaceutical. Just show of hands, how many people are experimenting with Cialis? Show of hands. Thank you, sir, in the back. Appreciate that. Yeah, so what we're talking about is a new class of drugs that what? Enhances performance, physical performance, cognitive performance, but when we figure out how to defeat Alzheimer's and dementia, or even a portion thereof, even in our lifetime, the possibility of having smart drugs will become what? A large rave, something that everybody will demand. Just like we've managed cardiovascular disease, and in some instances, certain forms of cancer have become manageable, the ability to be able to, when we, again, let's put these technologies together. When Alex finds out when he might need an organ, that's great. Now, Paul's going to find out when he may be carrying the gene for Alzheimer's. What are the implications then? Well, Paul's going to buy an insurance policy that's set up with a series of pharmaceutical enhancements, nano-biomedical enhancements. His employer will help pay half of it. The government will pay maybe another portion. He'll pay another portion because he's such a smart guy, successful in business. And now what do you have? You have a marketplace for human enhancement. What are the implications for this marketplace? How about transforming society as we know it? How about creating a new global competition between the enhancers, the non-enhancers? What are the implications for that future emerging, let's say, within the next 3 to 5 years? I'd say about 85%. You ready for that future? Are you particularly, are you ready for that future? Okay. Let's move on from design brains. So the idea economy is all about big opportunities. This is in its earliest stages, as I said earlier. But let me just say, the idea economy, there are 5 key technologies that I'm looking at tracking around the idea economy, and I'll break down a couple of them. Nanobio, IT, neuro, and quantum are the top ones. I'm just giving you a preview. I'm going to dip into population, blow through this, and then we'll talk a little bit more about that. So global population has doubled over the past 45 years. I want you just to appreciate, in the history of civilization, this is unprecedented. 45 years is nothing. We've doubled the population. For the most part, because of great public health, a certain degree of less wars. But by 2025, 80% of the world's 8 billion, and maybe a little higher, we're at 7 billion now, will be in developing nations. UN forecasts it could go as high as 9 billion. The implications of feeding and providing habitat and providing work today are straining the system. I mean, the carrying capacity alone for managing 7 billion, I give the world about a C- on that today. A couple billion people in poverty, a couple of billion people still in poor sanitation. Still, we're talking about 15 micro-wars on the planet. But again, as an entrepreneur, I would say great opportunity to do what? To address some of these with better communications and technology and healthcare. But what's behind all of this is, as I said earlier, is depopulation, right? So fertility rates are dropping. There's this relationship between, the more wealth and prosperity a nation has, the less babies they make, simply put. And if you don't offset it with significant immigration to replace the workers, guess what? Your future is screwed. Does that translate? Well, does everybody get what I'm saying? This is a massive problem that everybody has to own. The millennials want to own it because they don't want to support the boomers. The boomers have a largest concentration of wealth in the West, right? So their balance between millennials' work, productivity of nations, innovation, technology, and boomer wealth, we got to do a better job in terms of policymakers, because it's like politicians get about 1/10 of that. We got to help them get the rest. But this is what's behind it. If you look at the fertility rates that are dropping, and mostly in the developing world. So there's this two worlds challenge I've written about for a decade. The two worlds challenges in the in the West, particularly Japan, Europe, the United States, let's say North America, the United States, there is an aging society, a large concentration of wealth. Certainly, as the aging continues, you're going to have a hard time with replacement values to keep productivity running to be able to sustain. And also at the same time, what's happening is that the boomers are living longer than any generation. This is dramatic. I mean, the average, if you take the mean, the average age that humans live to on the planet of all recorded history was 18, okay? I mean, nobody ever thought when Social Security in the US was designed as a policy, anybody would live past 55, okay? Now you're talking about average life expectancy in between Europe and the United States. You know, you're talking about somewhere between 75 and starting every year to peak up towards 80. What are the implications for that? Unbelievable in terms of the inability to be able to economically sustain this. So the two worlds challenges, the developing world, youth bulge, aging world, wealth, and guess what? Even though today the youth bulge is China, India, Latin America, certainly Asia, right? Well, you need those bodies to do what? There's a huge talent war going on in order to sustain global business. That's the underlying kind of skirmishes that are going on that are really much more than a skirmish. It's much more of a global war. There's more jobs than there is talent to run those jobs. Now again, it's a lot to take in, I know. Demographics, loss in productivity, two worlds challenge, but this two worlds challenge, this challenge is the tension that will define the next 100 years. Why? What happens in China by 2025? 2025, 2030 is China starts to age. China starts looking like Europe and the United States. What are the implications? I can tell you right now. Here it is. If China grows old before they grow rich, they're going to have 100 times the problems in terms of social stability than they have today. And if they get there before they really create a viable democracy, it will be it'll be the largest problem for the world. Why? All right, here we go with economics. Here's a quick global economic treatise. Ready? Here's the world economy. There's the euro, there's the dollar, and then there's the Sino-dollar and euro. The Chinese are holding more euros and more dollars than anybody in the world. That foundation is the glue that holds the entire economy, global economy, together. You blow that up because of unsustainable demography, you blow it up because of some war, you blow it up because of some trade breakdown between these three fundamental pieces, Sino-dollars, Sino-Europes, it's synthetic currency, it's held in real paper, euro framework, dollar framework. If you mess with this fundamental linchpin of the global economy, putting aside certainly what's happening in other economies, you'll end up creating chaos. Do I think that's going to happen? No, I don't. I don't. I think in many regards, it's what's kept the world from sinking into, since 2008, a major financial crisis. My point of this two worlds challenge is it represents demography is destiny, and it will shape the future. The rise of Africa is the next China. And it doesn't look like that today. There's 7 nations in Africa that will be the nations that will have the fastest growing wealth index of any nations in the world. Now, much of Africa is failing states, poor governance, but the rise of Africa over the next 5 to 25 years, because of their natural resources, because of their demographics, it's about 1.5 to 2 billion. That offsets China. You're talking about a huge market. Huge market. How many people are selling into Africa today? How many people are doing anything with Africa today? Yeah, pay attention to Africa. Is it as big as potentially the space business? Is it as big as the health enhancement business? Is it as big as mobile and internet, all the other stuff we're focusing on? Or even nanoscience and the next generation of molecular manufacturing? Yes, it is. I'm here to tell you, it's much bigger. And 80% of what you buy every single day or you sell every single day is an opportunity for Africa. I'm going to say a few things about global workforce. More jobs than talent. This will continue. This is the beginning of a massive shift in offshoring. Why? Corporations that can't get the talent they need locally will go where? Not because of the dollar, but because of the talent. And there'll be a shift to more and more automation. I was in Bangkok not even 3 weeks ago. Biggest challenge for a large healthcare system there, 2,000 doctors, they touch over 1 million people a year, 70% of them are from outside of Asia, is that they cannot automate fast enough to be able to deliver the services they need. Now you multiply that times, try 1,000 companies, and then you multiply that times about 500 industries, logistics, finance, healthcare, you name it. And that's the future where we're going. Why? Because there's this gap between the sophisticated new platforms of technologies, particularly big data, analytics, ability to be able to have very robust IT business intelligence, and humans' ability to get trained to manage these. So what's happening is that people are building these systems, recognize this, and what are they doing? Focusing more on automation, focusing more on doing more with less humans. What is that going to lead to? Here's my forecast for where we're going with that. I know somebody wanted to ask me that question, right? Paul. Yeah. Where we're going with that is what? We're going to have 80% of the industrial global infrastructure run by smart machines that humans will not be able to understand and will be dependent upon. And they may be doing, here's the thing, they may be doing a really good job at fundamental problems that, guess what? They're complex problems that we have failed at. And they're problems that most people are not really paying attention to, such as water stress. Will we have enough clean and fresh water to maintain certain parts of the world in terms of agricultural production? I can tell you right now, there are some of the largest food companies in the world are my clients. They are scared. Why? They see the demographics, they see the demand on their supply chains, and they recognize we may not have the food, that means grains, protein, oils, 3 big ones, to sustain the next billion people. And again, let me mash it up with another major trend. What's going to happen next is the emergence of the next middle class, which is going to be India, China. A big demand. As societies become more affluent, they demand what? More protein. The change, their dietary appetites become global. The ability to meet that demand, I can tell you, I mean, it's driven protein prices up dramatically. You take Africa's 1 billion, you take another billion, you say the middle class is approximately a billion, new billion between Africa and China. Call that 2 billion and change on top of the existing 5 billion for grains, protein, oils. The carrying capacity of the planet is not there today. Now, on top of that, you say, gee, water is fundamental to all that. Critically important. Now, does that represent a huge business opportunity? I'm not painting this picture to say, gee, the world's falling apart. No, I'm saying there are great challenges, great opportunities to be able to what? Make a good business as entrepreneurs using many of the technologies you have. I just want to say a few other things about the rise of women. We've not done this, we haven't done this great. More jobs and talent is part of the global workforce. The rise of women power in boardrooms, I think this is a shift that has not happened. There's been a lot of talk about, Twitter's got all guys on their board, and gee, what's up with that? And many companies still are dominated. The glass, ceiling has not been broken by women. This is going to change. Interesting demographic. In North America, I can tell you, there are more women graduating from college and high school than men. The workforce in the US is 51 to 50, almost 2% more women than men. I suspect in Europe you're going to see similar demographics. The rise of women as a resource, a non-testosterone resource, is going to shape the future, and I think for the better, since I'm surrounded by daughters and wives. I've got a couple of each. Okay. Only one I'm married to right now. All right, let me move on. I don't want to say any more about workforce. Let me say something about emerging markets where the fastest growth is. Just in mind, keep in mind, I've just come back from Malaysia. Between Malaysia, Indonesia, interestingly, in Indonesia, it's the 4th largest software programmers on the planet come from Indonesia. Amazing. Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, we're talking about between 7.5 to as much as I forecast 9% GDP against in the US, you may be talking about 1.5 to 2, all of Europe, 1.5 to 3. But again, this point I want to make earlier, as societies become more affluent, their rising longevity is going to be an offset to that. So you're looking at the future. I'm going to say a few more things about the next middle class. Don't forget Latin America. But you want to think about how to serve the next 2 billion consumers. What's up with that? I also want to make a case for looking at the world differently, not just in terms of demographics, but cities. Pay attention to the next cities. What are the 10 or 20 most important cities to you? You're going to find that 3/4 of them in the developing world, but 80% of global GDP is being driven by half the world living in cities. By 2025, I'm looking at some studies which show about 600 cities are really important, and they're going to generate $64 trillion. Now, so when you look at your global marketing, you want to look at cities. Forget about nations, regions. Think about cities. Why? Cities are going to have access to the internet. Cities are going to have access to high speed. Cities are going to have access to what? Logistics, warehousing, distribution, payment systems. Cities are where the action is. We talked about food earlier. Let me move on. I'll say a few things about the environment, and then we'll do some questions. Okay? All right? I'll save a few minutes of questions. Things I want to say about the environment are this. Look, if there's been any key area that we've dropped the ball on politically, it's been about managing the realities of climate change policy. Somewhere the disconnect between politicians and customers with corporations in the middle is massive. Likely the private sector is going to be increasingly, people's decisions to purchase or use brands is going to be driven by how attentive brands are to this being socially accountable for understanding what's happening to the climate, regardless of how stupid politicians are. And they're stupid, okay? This is a massive disconnect. It's not lost when we do focus groups around the world, climate change and the impact of corporations that should be responsible about and demonstrate that responsibility and awareness of being a good contributor to managing climate and doing their part for reducing carbon. Don't think that the global policies are not being paid attention to by consumers. I think these market opportunities are huge. Again, green market opportunities are bigger than anything to do with the internet. Green market opportunities are bigger than any other market I've seen. They're right up there with the top ones I've been talking about. Space sounds too wacky for you. You're not into health and human enhancement yet. That sounds too going sideways. You think mobile marketing is good enough. Take a look at just information about green markets, solutions, and industries. A big data approach to that is going to drive a lot of opportunities. Energy futures. I can say a few things about this, but the most exciting one is really about the supergrid. The grid networks. Is there a renewable energy marketplace for trading other than in Brazil and Europe in terms of carbon credits? This is the earliest stages of trying to create incentives to change this world. Inevitably, we're going to need a planetary supergrid. There'll be a regional one in Europe, there'll be one in North America, South America, and certainly one in China. The combination of supergrids controlled by and maximizing and trading energy together with autonomous entities that can be able to do that is where the future is. And it will lead to new kinds of installations on the sea. It'll lead to new energy solutions, designs, and I'm working with a handful of folks that even have schemes to do methane mining on the moon, solar arrays to being able to collect it. So let me finish by saying, before I take a few of your questions, let me just finish by giving you, again, I was told to talk a little bit about technology, so let me just finish here. This is the early stage of the innovation economy. It's all about innovate or die. It's all about radical technologies. And here is my map that is good for the next 100 years of key technologies. It's really about nanoscience, the manipulation of matter and atoms at the atomic level. It's all about what's next for biology, genomic informatics, the ability to be able to mix and match genes on demand, to be able to prevent illness. Biotechnology is all about the future of healthcare. Information in bits, today it's about mobile, tomorrow it'll be about wearables, tomorrow it'll be about creating the entire internet as an AI or artificial intelligence. Neurotechnology may be, because of this large statistics about growing older and dementia and Alzheimer's, this could be a massive new area of opportunities. Brain science, this is the decade of the brain. I want to say about quantum qubits to finish up the following. Look, manipulation of, if the manipulation of matter at the atomic level is nanoscience, I got news for you. Manipulation of time and space, which the Hadron Collider, which is the largest science experiment on the planet, the manipulation of time and space, that's what quantum technology is about. And qubits are to atoms and genes. Entirely new infrastructure for computing, entirely new infrastructure for cryptography, entirely new infrastructure for everything from creating drugs to transforming our world and meeting the grand challenges of the future. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Thank you very much. Well, I think James has given us some brilliant ideas on how to be future ready. And one of the themes you brought up, which was very interesting, was obviously about this population explosion up to 8-9 billion. And then obviously you talk later on about the rise of women as a resource. Do you think that that data could be potentially challenged and as a result, the way we are future ready? Because if more women go into education and take up positions in work, then that population figure of 8 or 9 billion in fact doesn't happen, and in fact population decreases, so we become more of a depopulation around the world. And you're seeing some great examples in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia, more women are going through higher education than many other countries around the world. They still can't drive a car, but it just shows you that there is finally a wake-up call of women as a resource and what they can bring. Still a long way to go. But do you think there's a danger that what you're predicting the future may have to change because of that?
No, I don't think the numbers are high enough. And genetically, for some reason, remember the most powerful force on the planet is DNA. DNA wants more DNA. We're just along for the ride, right? So if you notice, there are more women born than men, which is DNA's way of keeping the ball rolling. But I don't think that we're as much at risk to that. I think the rise of women will play an important historic and evolutionary role on the planet for changing the power structure. By the way, this will serve men. They just don't know it yet, and create a more peaceful, equitable, collaborative world. When the leaders of, for instance, China, the EU and America all sit down together and they're all women, it's going to be a very different game, and that will come.
And now you talked about the emergence of cities, and that's a really quite an interesting point of view, especially with governments, a very short-term view on things. You've got companies, businesses that are looking much more longer term than those governments put together.
Right.
So how much focus do you think this audience in particular, let's face it, Central Eastern Europe have been quite insular in a way. People have forgotten about this market, and they've done pretty well by themselves and going out there and now trading with the rest of the world. What more can they do when they look at their strategy, in particular for cities and also the rise of Africa?
Well, we did a very interesting thing, and I'm from San Francisco. We created a sister city in Shanghai, for instance, and then we sent trade delegations there, and I was privileged to go. So we sent a trade delegation to Shanghai, and when you start to do that, and I'm sure that Poland and different Polish cities have different cities, but once you start to trade with the world, and you start to understand the world, you open up new markets. So don't, today's success is the greatest barrier to tomorrow's success. It's not always going to be the economy is decent and good. You're going to need bigger markets, different markets. The world really, as we say in America, is your oyster. You want to get ready for that future. Being future ready would be to look out over the horizon. What are markets that could use your products or services? What should you do to throw your net? I say throw it while your success is fairly decent now, or if you're hungry for growth, throw it. But I think Latin America looks very good. Parts of Asia look very good. India, very strong. And again, I think all you can do is increase your ability to create a more sustainable business once you become more global.
James, I'm just going to quickly check with the audience if we have a question we can take, because obviously I'm mindful of the time, because LUC ran over time, although he was fantastic. So I just want to see if we can gather a question from the audience. Very quickly, does anybody have a question for James? Please put your hand up now. And bearing in mind, I can't see you very well. Can you, James? It's sort of a nightclub here. You might be able to see us quite clearly. So does anybody have their hand up? Just need to double check.
Yes, I see a question.
You see a hand?
In the front row here. Paul?
Oh, right.
What was that question about? What's next for technology? What was that you wanted to ask?
We'll get a microphone to you, Paul. Paul, I think you've been words into your mouth now. So do you know the question that you've been told you have to ask?
Please.
No, I don't know the question I've been told to ask, but I have one thing I'm not completely in agreement with you.
Please.
You're talking about the falling birth rates and the fact that, it's a big challenge. Anyway, the falling birth rates is something that's happening anyway, right? And it's a time shift. I mean, it's already happening in Japan, it's currently happening in Europe, and we'll see it happening in the Middle East, South America, and then Africa. So do you think it's really a problem that we have a shrinking population? I don't think it is.
Well, so is it a problem that we have a shrinking population? Very good question.
Good question. And it's not a problem if you're in an area where you have plenty of people. So let's take China, right? China's problem today is not the shrinking workforce. It will be in 25 years. In Africa, you still have an exploding birth rate. In India, exploding birth rate. Is it a problem? Yeah, because they're struggling with being able to have good governance and water and food. So it's a problem in some parts of the world, not other parts of the world. By the way, shrinking workforce in Japan is so much of a problem. As you know, you live there, or one of you guys did, I can't remember which. At the end of the day, what's happened is the government's put out a bounty for women to get married. They'll pay you to have children. They do that in Singapore as well. Now, Singapore, less so than Japan. In Japan, by 2050, there may be a lot of raw fish and 20 people left and a whole bunch of robots. The offset of what's happened in Japan is that they are depopulating and they don't have an open immigration process. The only way societies can correct depopulation, you can't get people to make more quick enough, right? Is to change your immigration policies. Again, most dramatically in Germany, you now have an elected MP who is Turkish, whereas I remember when there were 5 million Turks sitting in Berlin that couldn't get jobs. That was in our era. So I think that's going to be an offset. So again, it all depends on where you are. Depopulation in Middle Eastern countries, it's a problem. Depopulation in countries like Israel, where there's going to be more Arabs than there will be more Israeli Arabs than there will be Israeli Jews. Is that a population problem? Yeah, it is. So it all depends on where you are and who you are.
Well, James, fascinating stuff, and I think it's been an excellent opening to the conference. I'm going to take that away from you as well, so you don't take that back to the States. But as a special thank you, we have a gift from Innovation from you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to James, everybody. Thanks. Here it is.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'd like to say it's a bit of space, but I think we're all going to invest in space when we leave this room today.
Super.
But the one and only James Canton, everybody. Thank you, James.
Appreciate that. And it's a pizza.
It's a pizza. Well, share it out if it is a pizza. It'd be fantastic. Thank you, James.